Welcome back to Politics Nation. Florida Senator Marco Rubio is lobbying very hard to be Mitt Romney's vice presidential running mate. But he has a little problem. The senator doesn't really understand the meaning of the word divisive.
We have not seen such a divisive figure in modern American history as we have over the last 3.5 years. Never have we seen such an effort to divide the American people in an effort to win an election as we have seen today.
Senator, let me break out the dictionary. Divisive means tending to cause disagreement or hostility between people. Senator, I don't know what you think the word means, because if you did understand what the word meant, then you wouldn't have Senator Jim DeMint introduce you. Yep, the man right there, he embodies the word divisive. Remember when he said this?
If we're able to stop Obama on this, it will be his Waterloo. It will break him.
How's that for divisive? Of course, breaking the president has been a goal of Senator DeMint literally since day one. The night of Obama's inauguration, Senator DeMint and other GOP leaders were less than a mile away, plotting how to block and undermine his agenda. Senator Rubio likes to talk about divisiveness, but has he met the leaders of his party?
So you did compromise?
We found common ground.
Why won't you say? You're afraid of the word.
I reject the word.
Our top political priority over the next 2 years should be to deny President Obama a second term.
How's that for divisive, Senator Rubio? I'd take that dictionary with you next time, because this is not divisive.
We're greater together than we are on our own. I believe that this country succeeds when everyone gets a fair shot, when everyone does their fair share, when everyone plays by the same rules. These aren't Democratic values or Republican values. These aren't 1% values or 99% values. They're American values.
Joining me now, former Congressman Alan Grayson, Democrat from Florida, who's now running to return to Congress, and Joe Madison, Sirius XM radio host.
Thank you.
Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Reverend Sharpton.
Congressman, let's start with you. Senator Rubio thinks the president is divisive. What do you make of that?
Well, remember how President Obama first came to the public's attention 7.5 years ago. He gave a beautiful speech in which he called for one America, not a blue America or red America, but one America. And that speech enabled him to win the Democratic nomination because that was an idea that appealed to Americans across the board, and then to win the presidency. But what he's been faced with from the Republicans is implacable division. Division just for the sake of division. Disagreeing just for the sake of disagreeing. Look what happened with the health care bill. More than 150 Republican amendments included in that bill, and no Republicans voted for it. Look at the grand bargain on the deficit that the president proposed to end the deficit. The Republicans wouldn't even show up and negotiate for it. But they're not just guilty of division, they're also guilty of subtraction. The Republicans have subtracted jobs, they've subtracted health care, they've subtracted from public education, and they want to subtract Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, student loans, and unemployment insurance.
Now, it's interesting you say that, Congressman, because the fact of the matter is when you deal with this question of divisiveness and partisan politics, the president has been criticized by members of his own party, some of us that are progressive, for leaning over too much. And now to call him divisive, it almost is laughable in some circles.
Right. I think that soon they'll wheel out Roger Clemens and he'll say that the president is guilty of using steroids. That makes as much sense as what Mark Rubio said.
Yeah. Joe Madison, we also saw Rubio attack this weekend the president's education. Watch this.
And so the president and his party's view of America's government and our lives is a failed one. It hasn't worked. These ideas that sounded so good in the classrooms at Harvard and Yale haven't really worked out well in the real world.
Harvard and Yale hasn't worked out well in the real world, Joe.
Yeah, well, they have worked out well in the real world. And matter of fact, he took that degree from Harvard, and his wife took her degree from Harvard. And what did they do? They didn't go to Wall Street and end up trying to invest in derivatives, which Wall Street didn't even know the definition of. But no, they worked in their community. And as a congressman, I hope will soon be congressman again, as he pointed out about subtraction, Rubio ought to recognize that his own party wouldn't even support President Obama when he granted Cuban Americans unrestricted rights to visit their families and to also send money to Cuba. He added that, and therefore Rubio is against his own people. He added, as you talked about in a couple of segments ago, he added 2.5 to 3 million jobs in the private sector. He added and expanded loan programs for small businesses. So, I mean, here's the pot calling the kettle black, as your staff pointed out in the presentation of this segment. I mean, they are the ones who said from the very beginning at the caucus room here in Washington, D.C., that we are not going to work with this president. Therefore, we want him to fail. And if this president fails, it means, unfortunately, what? The country fails. That is what is divisive, however you want to pronounce it.
Now, Congressman, let me go back to you. It's a lot of ugliness and divisiveness or divisiveness, as Joe said, whichever way you want to pronounce it. Governor Chris Christie attacked the president this weekend while he was addressing Kentucky Republicans. He said, and I'm quoting him, President Obama has cared more about posing and preening than progress. And then Congressman Joe Walsh, town hall this weekend. A constituent at Walsh's town hall attacked the president, and the Congressman Walsh listened and said nothing. Let me show it to you.
He should have said it before he was elected and said, I am a socialist, I believe in socialism, communism, Nazi, whatever, and say this is where I want to lead the country, not do it underhandedly.
However you want to label or define it, don't you think now after 3.5 years as a country, now we have a really good idea where the president wants to go?
Oh, absolutely, because he feels he has everybody by the cojones now.
I mean, real ugly, kind of crazy, shrill language, but it's being entertained and in some cases being recycled by some of the leaders in the Republican Party in some cases.
Well, you're going to see nothing but personal attacks against President Obama for the next 6 months because we've seen nothing but personal attacks against him for the past 4 years. You know, this whole question of his birth certificate. When has a white president ever been asked to produce a birth certificate? It's all nothing but personal attacks because they have no answers for anything. All they can do is make ad hominem arguments. There's a Harvard phrase for you. Ad hominem arguments. They've got no health policy worth discussing. Their health policy is basically don't get sick. They've got no educational policy worth discussing. And their economic policy is reverse Robin Hood. They're stealing from the poor and giving to the rich.
But I would also say to you that these guys must be trying to get a job with the next Men in Black movie, because I don't know what planet that they've lived on. Anybody in their right mind who's done any amount of study knows you can't be a communist and a socialist at the same time. You know, the Nazis fought the communists fought the Nazis. These are boogeyman terms. That's all these are. Yep. And that's all they're trying to do.
Well, I tell you something else, Joe, that anyone knows in politics. You don't criticize a candidate, an incumbent president, for a Harvard degree when your candidate has 2 Harvard degrees.
Well, thank you.
Former Congressman Alan Grayson have to go. Joe Madison, always good to have you on. Thank you both for your time.
Always good to be there for you.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you.
Ahead, today, major Catholic groups announced lawsuits against the Obama administration over birth control. And one of the biggest leaders is threatening to stop feeding the poor. And on a lighter note,
so in love.
We know now what inspired President Obama to sing at the Apollo, and it's not what you think. Stay with us.